Hey, Drew here, and I just want to be clear about the fact that when I criticize American Gods, it comes from a place of love because I want the show to be better. It's not because I hate it. Even in this third season, even in the first two episodes, I'd rather have this show and be able to watch it than not. And when I criticize it, it's just because I know that it could be so much more than it is. But I have to say, I don't actually have a lot of complaints about this third episode, Ashes and Demons. I feel like maybe they've actually started to figure out how to make the show work, and maybe the rest of the season will go more smoothly, but I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about it. And not that there weren't any, just that I probably won't be the one saying them. But overall, I just felt it was a very, very satisfying hour of television, and it kind of regained some of Neil Gaiman's whimsy, and particularly in the scenes with Laura Moon in the afterlife. I felt that Ian McShane kind of got his stride back as Mr. Wednesday, perhaps because he was given more Mr. Wednesday-like things to do as he seeks to manipulate and take back Demeter, who's kind of here played by Blythe Danner to replace the character that Kristen Chenoweth played in season one. And of course, I feel that it's really easy to see when McShane is just not engaged with what he's doing, but he seems really engaged here. He just seems like he's really relishing the chance to play the character this episode, and some of the lines that he gets to deliver are real zingers. I also just felt that on the whole, the pacing was just smoother and the episode was over before I knew it. So, all in all, positive things to say this week. So, the opening in Western Pennsylvania in 1765, I thought this was a pretty strong opening. Again, I do feel like, as one of you pointed out in the comments, the theme of coming to America has kind of dissipated as the show went on. I kind of feel that it wasn't really here as much as it could have been, but I feel that once it became clear that this was showing Demeter, who is a major character in this episode, I felt like it made sense as an opening, and I felt like it had kind of a vibe that reminded me of the film The Witch from David Eggers with Anya Taylor-Joy. Just kind of a horror vibe. It wasn't really clear what was going to happen. And apparently, it's one of those scenes where I thought that there was going to be violence of some sort against the woman who sacrificed the pig, but the god showed up and simply touched her on the head before it went into the credits. So I thought it was an overall good opening. I thought the cinematography in particular was very, very crisp and very, very visually distinctive from other sequences in the show during this scene, which I really appreciated. So right away, this established that this episode was going to have a lot to do with Demeter, and it was interesting to see Mr. Wednesday in full seduction mode at first, and when that failed, trying to manipulate and cheat his way into getting her out of the home and getting her fortune. Some of the lines between them were a little on the nose. I thought this part where he explained why he couldn't answer Demeter's question about why he wanted her out, honestly. I thought that the fact that he explained that out loud, instead of assuming that the audience could reason out why he couldn't answer that question, I think that was a little bit too overly explained. I think they could have left some of that. They could have cut some of that and the scenes would have been stronger, but I feel like there was good chemistry between Blythe Danner and Ian McShane in these scenes. The sparkle in Mr. Wednesday's eyes as he was preparing to go and find her, you could just sense his palpable interest in her, that she's not just a mark to him, that she's someone that he's genuinely interested in and cares about, and that it saddens him to see her giving up, as he puts it, on the worship of real people. And as he points out, the people in this nursing home would essentially worship her if she said she was a lizard queen. I thought the scenes of Laura Moon in Purgatory were pretty interesting. I feel like it captured the tone of a lot of Neil Gaiman's work, particularly his Sandman comics. I felt that while again, some of this wasn't as whimsical as his work typically is. I think it did a better job of capturing that whimsy than this show has oftentimes in the second and third seasons in particular. I thought that the way that they portrayed Purgatory as kind of this bureaucracy where no one really knows who's in charge, and it's hard to figure out what's supposed to happen or who goes where and what the purpose of it all is. I thought that was a really interesting portrayal. Kind of fits with the worldview of the show in a lot of ways. And I thought that it was an interesting psychological insight that Laura blames herself for the fact that her father seduced this woman and had this affair, and that she's not able to look back at the past without kind of putting herself into it in a way that isn't accurately reflecting what actually happened. She's not able to look at it objectively, that she has this wrong perspective of her own role in what happened to her parents' marriage and the infidelities that went on, and that this deeply affected her, and that it damaged her, and that it caused her to repeat the things that her parents did in her own marriage. And I think it's interesting. I think that this rings very true. I think it's something that we all do, where we feel guilt for things that perhaps weren't our fault. And it's it's very human, very relatable, and it's tragic here that, as Laura puts it, that it's too bad that she's already dead and that she couldn't have learned this lesson while she was still alive, and it could have affected her behavior differently. I also thought that the scenes in Lakeside were stronger this episode. I feel like the relationship between Shadow and Marguerite has escalated a little too quickly. Like, she was standing awfully close to him there while they were waiting to go look for the missing girl, and I felt that overall they just acted a little too familiar this episode. Last episode, she was really, really cold towards him, and now suddenly she's acting very, very warm towards him. I feel like this was a little bit too quick of a transition. I think that the mystery of the missing children is being played up here. I think it kind of takes the reader by surprise in the book because it's kind of so offhand mentioned when it comes up, and you kind of have to really be paying close attention to catch it, whereas it's kind of really becoming the main thing about Lakeside in the show. I felt that the touches of small town life were more colorful this episode. I thought Anne-Marie's interrupting of the sheriff, for instance, I thought that was just a very, very believable touch, and something that wouldn't happen in a big city, but you could see it happening in a small town community where this woman doesn't hesitate to talk over a law enforcement officer and to kind of take charge of the group, as it were. I also thought the conversation between Shadow and Sheriff Chad about the fact that we're not the kind of town that, looks at a black man and assumes that, he's guilty of some crime. I thought that was an interesting conversation. I think that they kind of towed the line with Shadow, calling him out for it and kind of just letting him stew in his own thoughts. I think that it was a tricky situation because the same thing happened to Shadow in the book, and they really didn't play up the racial angle there. But I feel like in 2021, with all the things that happened in last year in particular, I feel that they feel the need to address the elephant in the room. And I think they've done it appropriately, but perhaps not overdone it. I do feel that there may have been some missed opportunities with this season, just because without the character of Orlando Jones, and whatever the reason for him not coming back, I feel like his perspective was important to this show in the first two seasons. I feel that they are toning down a lot of these elements, and I think that it would be interesting to have a more explicit discussion of them than they are currently having. But this was the closest the show has come this season to really delving into that. But I appreciated these conversations. I felt like they gave a better picture of what the small town community is like. I'm enjoying the exploration of Shadow's powers. At this point in the story, in the book, I don't believe he actually knew that he was Mr. Wednesday's son yet, so I don't think he realized that he had powers. It's a little bit unclear how they are working. For instance, if Marguerite came and looked at that newspaper, would she see that the headline had changed? And, is it only Shadow seeing this in his mind, or is it something that actually physically changed? I assume it's something that physically changed because he didn't see it, so he doesn't even know that it changed. But it was a little bit unclear from the way that the scene was played out. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Shadow's powers over the course of the show as he grapples with the fact that he is the son of a god. I think that's going to be an interesting exploration. In terms of what's going to happen to Bilquis, I don't think she's dead. It seems pretty clear from the teaser for next week that she may have been arrested, potentially for the disappearance of the man that she swallowed up last week. I think that clearly Technology Boy and Shadow are going to go and try to seek out what happened to her. Potential spoilers for those of you who have not read the book by Neil Gaiman. Knowing what happens to Bilquis in the novel, I have to question whether they're not leading into her character's endgame here. But I also feel like this show really has a hard time holding on to its cast members. And the fact that Yetide Badaki is still willing to be in this show, that she's still, willing to be a member of the cast, I feel like it would be a mistake for them not to hold on to this character when they're already losing so much of the continuity with the earlier 2 seasons with, most of the cast members no longer present. So I would definitely like to see an expanded role for her this season. It seems as though what happened last episode that she seemed to have some kind of indigestion because of the guilt she was feeling for consuming this man, as she has texts coming from his granddaughter asking where he is and asking him to come home. And my suspicion is that they're taking this character in a direction where they want her to actually grapple with what she's doing. They want to say, well, is it actually okay for you to take people this way? You are consuming them for your own purpose, for your own enlargement, and people are not a disposable resource. So I feel like they could be taking the character in a new direction, trying to have her have a kind of redemptive arc. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. That's just what I suspect. Don't know if that's actually what will happen. One last thing to note, I'm interested to see where the plot line with the band Blood Death, led obviously by Marilyn Manson, goes. Apparently a bunch of the band members have been murdered, and now the leader of the band is calling for justice. I was a little confused if he was calling for justice on Odin or from Odin, but in any case it seems as though the new gods probably had something to do with this, because they didn't like the fact that Odin was using this band to get worship for himself, and so they kind of sought to cut it off at the source. But I'm interested to see how this plot line plays out. They didn't really do much with it in the first episode other than have a kind of a cool cold open, but I'm interested to see where it goes in subsequent episodes from here. So those are just my thoughts on the 3rd episode for what they are worth. I'm enjoying this season, but it does have it's not the same show that it was in season 1, to be sure, but I am enjoying it. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows such as The Luminaries, which I read the book and I'm excited to review that, even though many of you may have already seen it if you are in the UK, but I'm still going to review it on a weekly basis, assuming there's enough interest after the first week. And I'm also going to be reviewing Clarice, the sequel to The Silence of the Lambs on CBS All Access. So if you're interested in seeing my weekly reviews of those shows or any of the other shows I'm currently reviewing, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.